doing the countdown, Harris. Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's Jerry Miller. It's good to be with you on a Thursday, a wet Thursday in Charlottesville and Central Virginia. And I'll tell you what, I am feeling good because I know we have someone coming on this program that's going to make us look fantastic. His name is Dave Norris, a one-time mayor here in Charlottesville, Virginia, a man who has tremendous respect in this community. I let a lot of folks know on social media that Dave was going to join us, and I'll tell you what, people coming out of the woodwork left and right, giving Dave props, asking if this dude would run for city council. Where I'm going with this is just give it a man who really did a good job from a civic duty standpoint in our community. A lot of love. Before we get to Dave Norris, let's thank the sponsors that make this program possible. First, we're going to start with Sean and Roxanne Simmons at Greenberry's Coffee. I don't know if you guys know this, but roughly 28 years ago, Sean and Roxanne Simmons launched a coffee company out of the McIntyre Office Park. That was their roasting facility. Barracks Road was their first location. Husband and wife team that used a beat-up Honda Civic to take their coffee all around to the restaurants in Charlottesville. When they weren't driving their coffee to the restaurants in Charlottesville, the husband and wife tandem was behind the counter morning, noon, and night. The kind of entrepreneurial stories that get me jacked on I Love CVille because it's the best of Charlottesville, Virginia. They have locations in Qatar, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Portland, Washington, D.C., homegrown business doing big-time things, just like Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Who's got your back? Dr. Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine has your back. This guy, without question, changing people's lives at Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Good show planned for you. Let's share the feed and like the feed so we can get a positive attention on Charlottesville, Virginia. What I would like to do is welcome a man that I think is made a tremendous impact in our community, a mayor, a city councilor, a man who's been involved from a lot of charities, a lot of nonprofits. Dave Norris, our guest. Let's go ahead. Harris and Judah, welcome Dave to the screen. First, Dave, I'm grateful for your time.
Well, it's great to be here, Jerry, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I love what you're doing with the show. I love, you're bringing attention to local issues. Kind of shedding a positive light on what's going on in Charlottesville, giving people a good platform, and I particularly like the work you're doing to support local animal rescue charities.
Yes.
So I know that's near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
So thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Our pleasure. On that note, Greenberry's is donating $1 from one of their coffees to Caring for Creatures. We helped set that up, an animal rescue in Fluvanna County that is doing awesome things. Let's start with Dave Norris. We know you as the mayor. We know you as a city councilor.
Yeah.
We know you as someone who's actively involved in improving Charlottesville. How about introduce everybody to what Dave Norris is doing today?
Sure, for sure. Yeah, no, and for my day job, I am now serving as the redevelopment coordinator for the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. And so we are undertaking this pretty massive project to revitalize all of our public housing neighborhoods in Charlottesville, working in partnership with Riverbend and Red Light and Castle Development, and of course working very closely with our residents and our citywide resident association called FAR, Public Housing Association of Residents. So that's keeping me busy on the job front these days, and it's a great project to be involved with. I just started not too long ago, and I know you've been talking on the show a little bit about the project and asking people their thoughts about it, so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or if your listeners have any questions about that. But it's a pretty, I really feel like in many ways it's the single best opportunity that we have in Charlottesville to really change the dynamics of poverty in Charlottesville, address race relations and racial inequities in Charlottesville. It affects so many of our residents, and we have an opportunity to really do something powerful and positive for our community if this goes well, which I think it will.
Good answer. Okay, so we're going to get straight into this. And Harris, our director, Harris Tolber, we have a sizzle reel waiting to happen. We'll start with the question I'm going to ask him and then go all the way through to Dave's answer. You are a point of contact with Coran Capshaw and Riverbend Development in a public-private partnership with the city of Charlottesville and one of its prime pieces of real estate, which is Crescent Halls. I think it's safe to say Crescent Halls is dilapidated, needs tremendous TLC, tremendous upkeep that's not perhaps been happening, and Coran has risen from the ashes, maybe as a savior to help make this project a reality? The show is yours, Dave.
Yeah, no, so Coran, I got to give him a lot of props because he has basically lent the resources and assets and technical expertise and money of his development company and some of his other partners to this endeavor pro bono, not charging a penny, which is pretty rare in the development world.
Sure.
For a developer not to ask for a penny. In large part, well, there's many reasons. Coran has very quietly been involved in public housing for years now, and he doesn't brag about it, but he's been sponsoring, for instance, West Haven Community Day going back many years, been donating money for backpacks for kids at West Haven. I mean, there's a lot of things he's been doing very quietly over the years. And this is really a major kind of step up on his part to help us, the community and the Redevelopment Housing Authority, not just at Crescent Halls, but we've got 7 public housing sites all over the city. Crescent Halls will be the first one to be renovated, but there's many others to come, and we're excited to be working with them. And so far, it's been a really positive partnership. I don't know that we could have done it without them, because Riverbend Development and all their partners and Virginia Community Development Corporation, all the people they've brought to the table have just been invaluable.
Good answer right there. So, Harris, that's the end of the sizzle reel. Good answer right there from Dave Norris. I'll ask the natural follow-up questions. Right. I think one of the natural follow-up questions is, we know Coran's office right across the street from Crescent Halls.
That's right.
He probably sees this building often. That's safe.
Mm-hmm.
Probably sees that this has tremendous potential because of its location and proximity to downtown. The folks that often interact with us on the show wonder, a developer, and I think it's a fair wonder, does he have legitimately genuine philanthropic and altruistic intentions, or is this potentially a leverage point or a springboard for Coran to build goodwill and equity with Planning Commission and City Council and City Hall to further his interests in other projects?
Well, I don't know that those are necessarily mutually exclusive, but I would say, just from my own interactions with him and his team, I think they see this as, they've been blessed by this community. They've done very well in business, and this is an opportunity to really give back and to address an issue that's literally in his backyard, as you say. I mean, his office overlooks Crescent Halls. He has spent a lot of time over the years in getting to know public housing residents, getting to know the issues in public housing, and I think this is legit an opportunity to do good on their part. And does that mean that it could help build capital down the line? That's I can't get inside his head to know whether or not that's how much of a motivator that is. But I can tell you this is something that they're investing a lot of time and $5 million of their own money through the Dave Matthews Band and Red Light and Riverbend. That's not an insignificant contribution.
Yeah.
So I really do feel like that whole team, Coran, Dave Matthews, that whole group, really is invested in this in a very positive way, in a very helpful way. And we're happy to have them.
That's a great answer right there. So let's turn that, Harris, into a second sizzle reel. My question into his answer. John Pritzloff, who's tight with that Coran and Red Light and Allen Taylor community, watching the show now. Bobby Kirby watching, Lauren Linsky, Des Raj, Michael Allenby of the Festi on the line, Tim Ryan, Ray Cadell, real estate agent extraordinaire on the feed. Ray's good people.
Ray's good people.
He's Charlottesville.
Yeah.
What we love about Charlottesville.
Absolutely.
The public-private partnership scares people. I think you're a perfect guy to ask about this, because not only are you actively involved at Crescent Halls, but you're the one-time mayor of Charlottesville.
Right.
Talk to me about the public-private partnership dynamic.
Well, one of the things that I tried to do when I was in office was to figure out, how do we leverage the resources of the private sector, the nonprofit sector, to help make positive things happen in our community. Government can play a role in solving problems, but it oftentimes isn't the best sort of force for solving the problem entirely on its own. And so how do we reach out and work with people, in this case like Coran, or when I was in office, we created a partnership with the YMCA. So instead of us building a new publicly funded rec center, we worked with the YMCA, put a little bit of city money in, put some city land up, but leveraged millions of dollars from the private sector and the nonprofit sector to provide a resource for our community. It's one small example. So we're always trying to figure out, how do we get innovative, how do we get creative in leveraging these resources. sometimes public-private partnerships work very well. Sometimes there's some challenging ones, but I think in general, it's the way we need to be working.
Very good, very good. Crescent Halls, and a couple more questions on this. Crescent Halls, what do you think is the future of the spot? What do you think is the future of how it ties to potentially the downtown mall as it heads to Ix Art Park, which is inevitable? Alan Kajin and Ludwig Kutner, owners of the Ix site, I know are working actively to bring as many events through Brian Weimer, who's the director of Ix. He's having concerts, he's having festivals. We did Dog Fest there. He tried a city market. I heard through the grapevine that this past winter market the city tried to drop the hammer on them and asking them the day of about permits and why they didn't have certain permits, perhaps through fear of losing control of a market that's on Water Street. Right. So where I'm going with this is this piece of land that is Crescent Halls, a lot of folks say it has a lot more value than being subsidized or affordable housing.
Well, the fact is, the Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority owns about 40 acres of land throughout the city. There is very little land left available to develop or to preserve truly affordable housing, and so we're not looking to flip that piece of land and convert it to some upscale housing development. The whole thrust of the project at Crescent Halls is to renovate the building from top to bottom to create a much better living environment for the residents who live there, who have been living, as you said earlier, in pretty substandard conditions for years now. That building is crumbling. It needs a thorough renovation, and thankfully we're now working hard. Our goal is to break ground this year, by the end of this year, to break ground to do a top-to-bottom renovation. It has 105 units in it right now. It'll have 105 units when we're done, all reserved for very low-income seniors and people with disabilities. So that's basically a renovation in place. The goal is to preserve housing for some of the most economically marginalized members of our community, and make sure that they have, they have heat in the winter, and they have AC in the summer, and they have, all the systems are working better, and they have better, safer housing. And I think that's going to set a tone for the next project, and the project after that is, how do we improve our communities from within? How do we avoid displacing residents? How do we create new opportunities? Because we do own 40 acres. A lot of it's low density housing. And so how do we use this to create slightly higher density and build more units? We have a severe shortage of affordable housing. I know you've talked about it with Michael Payne and others on the show. There's a severe shortage of affordable housing. With our acreage, we can take a nice dent out of that problem. We're not going to solve it ourselves, but we can make some pretty good strides in terms of building, not necessarily building more public housing, because the funding is just simply not there from the federal government to build more public housing. But we can certainly build more affordable housing of other types and create opportunities from within for residents to climb the ladder, maybe potentially become homeowners, get jobs and economic opportunities through this whole process. So it's not just investing in the physical capital of the buildings, but investing in the human capital of our residents, helping them all to achieve their highest potential. So,
very good. Yeah. I like this. I like where we're going, and I like that you're a straight shooter and you're willing to talk about things that sometimes folks aren't willing to talk about. Let's thank people who are watching us right now. Jay Wyant, thank you for watching us. Michael Buchensky from First Heritage Mortgage, thank you for watching us. Michael Allenby, we love you, homie. Lauren Linsky, Chris Turner, John Gilmer. Guys, like the stream and share the stream. Let's put the positive spotlight on Charlottesville. Dave Norris, kind enough to join us. Like it and share it. If you have a question, put it in the chat box. I'm getting a lot of questions here through Twitter and through text message, which I'm happy to relay to Dave. One of the questions I'm relaying to Dave is, of course, affordable housing. Affordable housing in the news more so than ever. I think this is one of the, not fallouts, but one of the potential positives that have happened since A12, is people are more willing to talk about topics that otherwise were swept under the rug pre-A12. Affordable housing is one that I think is front and center and all over the news cycle. First, I had Mayor Walker and Councilors Heather Hill and Councilor Kathleen Galvin on the program, and all three characterize our affordable housing is at a crisis point or beyond. We'll get beyond that topic because I think you're going to agree with them. How do we get to this situation to begin with here?
Well, there's a number of factors that contribute to it, and there's no one easy solution to it. Basically, you need an all of the above approach to solving this problem. It is a crisis. I heard Rory Salzenberger on your show a couple days ago talking about it's largely a supply and demand situation where we just haven't built enough supply of housing. That obviously increases costs. And we haven't built enough intentionally affordable housing, which is a big problem. And so we've made some gains in recent years, but there's obviously a lot of work to do. There was just a housing analysis done within the last year that showed, in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to have upwards of 3,500, 4,000 households that are going to be severely impacted by the lack of affordable housing. And so we've got to really do more to get our arms around this problem. There's a lot of good people that are dedicating their time to this. Sometimes we talk too much and we don't do enough. And so I get a little impatient, frustrated sometimes with the amount of talk and the sort of lack of action.
Sure.
But there are some good projects in the pipeline. We need more. And again, it's not, I love what Michael Guthrie's been talking about in terms of, kind of creative infill. We need that. We need the
He was talking about the duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes that are designed in a way that match what the neighborhood looks like, but still offers the affordable housing.
Right. So you maintain the neighborhood character while including the stock of affordable, or expanding the stock of affordable housing. We need more projects like the crossings. We need more. We need to redevelop our public housing. We need to, increase opportunities for affordable home ownership, first-time home buyers. We have to do more with reversing some of the negative impacts of gentrification and displacement. Got to help longtime homeowners stay in their homes, stay in their neighborhoods. There's a lot we need to be doing, and it really does. It's an all of the above strategy and I love that people are talking about we need to do more.
Good answer right there. Thank you, Ray, for sharing this show on your Facebook page. Guys, if you could share the show and at least like the show, it gets more attention on Dave and on Charlottesville and the topics that need to be discussed in long-form content and not just 15-second sound bites. Affordable housing, should it be around the downtown mall, which is the epicenter and heartbeat of the community? Mm-hmm. I see both sides. One side is the land that's around these 8 blocks, whether it's the merchants themselves, the business owners downtown, restaurant owners, merchants, music venues, or the developers. They say the land around the downtown mall should be proliferated and developed with people that are homeowners, that have potentially disposable income, that can walk to and fro their condos and their penthouses, like the one Keith was planning on Water Street, and then spend that disposable income downtown, which would then trickle over throughout the community. I see that side. Mm-hmm. The other side is a more altruistic or genuine or philanthropic and less capitalistic and entrepreneurial. And that side is we absolutely should include affordable housing that caters to folks that maybe make less than, 30% or below of AMI, area median income. And we should have that affordable housing put downtown to create a sense of diversity to help counter what African Americans are saying, that they feel 60% or 40%, I forget what the exact number was, they did not feel African Americans welcome going downtown. Mm-hmm. Open-ended question to you, Dave. What are your thoughts? We
definitely need a mix, and so I think about particularly people who work on the downtown mall who are making $8, $9, $10, $11 an hour, and a lot of the service and retail industry downtown. If you can't afford to live near where you work, you're going to have to drive, you're going to have to park. We all know that parking is an issue. It's getting more expensive. If and when they put the meters back on the streets, that's a big tax on the incomes of downtown workers. So we need a mix, and over the years there have been proposals to build more mixed income housing downtown. People don't necessarily remember, before the travesty now known as the Landmark Hotel, Oliver Kuttner actually came forward with a proposal for that site to actually build worker housing.
I loved his idea.
Yeah.
Was that the micro units idea?
Yeah. Well, that was before. He also had one over in the Glass House for micro units, but he had a very similar idea for the parcel that's now known as the Landmark Hotel. So the idea is build units where people people who work downtown can afford, who can afford to live downtown.
Which just seems so obvious.
Right.
Does it not?
Yeah. So if you can't have all sort of high income upscale housing, I think throughout the community we need a better mix, and we need to end the practice that we've been segregating people for decades now in Charlottesville. There's some great journalism coming out. Jordy Yeager.
It was amazing. The Charlottesville Tomorrow story.
Charlottesville Tomorrow. There's a cover story in CVille Weekly this week about zoning and how it contributes to segregation in our community. We've got to break down some of those walls, and we've got to get intentional about it. And it's not rocket science, but I'll leave it there.
There you go. And let's thank some people for sharing the stream here. We got Jay Wyant. I see you, Jay Wyant. Thank you for sharing the stream, Jay. Jason Krigler, thank you for sharing the stream. Kristen Davis Singh, thank you for sharing the stream. She says, great questions and even better answers from Dave Norris. Guys, like it and share it. It gives attention to Charlottesville and puts the topics that need to be put in the spotlight. One of the things that I am following really closely, and as I came here for UVA. Mm-hmm. This is 2000.
Right.
First 5 years, all I cared about was going to the bar,
right.
meeting girls, partying, having a good time.
Yeah. And now you're all grown up.
And then I fall in love, have a wife,
right.
have a 10-month-old.
Yeah.
Really changed things for me. I know you have kids. Mm-hmm. And now I'm least concerned with that and more concerned with where is the future of the community going.
Yeah.
My business is called I Love CVille.
Right.
So having CVille in a good situation, regionally, nationally, and locally is good for the business.
Sure.
I am a social entrepreneur that runs a for-profit business that's focused on leaving Charlottesville in a better place. Mm-hmm. There are 3 city council spots that are open, up for re-election.
Huge.
We don't know what Kathy's doing. Mm-hmm. We don't know what Mike is doing, what Wes is doing. Mm-hmm. They each could run again. Right. We do have some very qualified candidates like Lloyd, like Michael Payne, who've come on the show. We're reaching out to the others that are running to invite them. Great. I'm going to start open-ended to you, sir.
Okay.
3 city council spots. Can you put the magnitude or the impact or the level of importance for this maybe June 11th primary more so than the November election?
Yeah, it's huge. This really is an opportunity to change not only obviously the face of council, but to change the direction of the city. When you have 3/5 of the city council coming up for an election, that's a big opportunity, which is why we're seeing so many people stepping forward and throwing their hat in the ring, which I think is very encouraging. And I know most of the people that are running, and I know a couple others that are looking seriously at throwing their hats in the ring in the not too distant future. So it's going to be an exciting year for political junkies like me. This is what we live for, and I think this council has done some.
How do you characterize this council?
Well, to me, the most exciting thing that's going on politically in Charlottesville was this sort of tidal wave, the tsunami that we saw in the last election, where for the first time in 70 years, we had an independent who was swept into office, and really kind of with a pretty strong mandate to really change some of the fundamentals, and to me that's exciting. And the work that our mayor is doing to address some issues, she's not, you've had her on the show, she's not satisfied with just sort of nibbling around the edges of the status quo, and she ran with a vision for a systemic change, and I think that's very exciting. And so we really have to address the fundamentals. And one of the first things that she talked about in her campaign, the number one item on her campaign platform, is something that I think every taxpayer should be concerned with, which is, are we sure that the investments that we're making on, the city investments, the city dollars that are going into the community are really making an impact, and if not, let's change the way we're spending our taxpayer dollars. That's huge. And so I think every taxpayer should be concerned with that. And it's not enough to just maintain people in poverty. It's not enough to, kind of nibble around the edges of the status quo. But we really need, I hate to mix metaphors here, but we really need to move the dial. And so that's what I think our mayor is trying to do, and asking some really hard questions, and not, across the board, whether it's housing, schools, police, you name it. And we've got some entrenched problems here. It's a great community, you know that. Your whole business, or this, you're shedding positive light on all the great things that are happening here. But we've got some entrenched problems that we've got to get our arms around. And so I think one of the questions for this year's election is who's going to kind of take up that mantle, who's going to continue that work of addressing some of the fundamentals. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Do you think that the mayor, and I agree with a lot of what you said, she's fearless. Mm-hmm. She is unafraid to speak her mind.
Yes.
I think she's much more savvy than people are giving her credit for. Mm-hmm. I think she has some visionary qualities to her. She's certainly undeniably courageous and vocal.
Yes.
The counter to how she's going about being the mayor is maybe it's in a way that's more antagonistic and less diplomatic than it needs to be. She said on the show here that she's had yet to have one-on-one conversations with a number of Albemarle County supervisors, mm-hmm. which I've found very concerning. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on, as a former mayor who knows how to play the game, who was very good at like having both sides of the voter box respect you mm-hmm. and get on your page, mm-hmm. how she's going about from a strategy, the diplomacy, and the political side of her approach.
Right. I mean, so first of all, there is a learning curve to the job. There's no doubt about it. And I've seen her. She is a quick learner, as you said. She's very savvy. She's very bright, and so I think she's growing into the job. But she also was very clear from the beginning to say she is completely comfortable making people uncomfortable. And so and that's. That obviously, she knows that she has a limited time horizon to address some issues that have been really affecting our community for decades, if not centuries. And so she is impatient. She wants to see change happen. And I do know that sometimes she does make people uncomfortable. She asks hard questions. She doesn't see any sacred cows, and so, most recently there's been this conversation about funding for local nonprofits, and she's asking the question that needs to be asked, which is, are these organizations doing enough to change the fundamental? Are they doing? It's not enough. Again, it's not enough to maintain people in poverty. Are we doing the best we can to help people climb out of poverty? To make sure that the inherent dignity of every individual is being recognized. That every citizen has an opportunity to realize their highest potential. And Mayor Walker has seen from an early age in her own community that that's not always the case. And so she's asking hard questions. She occasionally does make people feel uncomfortable. I think she's asking the right questions. So sometimes it may not come across as diplomatic as it could, but I think she's heading in the right direction.
Good answer right there. Stacy Brookman, thank you for joining us. Garrett Klingel, thank you for joining us. Michael Guthrie, thank you for joining us. Michael, we highlighted your idea of quadplexes, duplexes, triplexes in neighborhoods, having the exterior maintain the same look of the neighborhood to preserve authenticity in the neighborhood. Dave Norris liked your idea a lot. Ray Cadell says, Dave is a guy who can talk to all of us, left, right, liberal, conservative, rich, not rich, poor, whatever it may be. We need another Dave Norris, maybe somebody like Lloyd Snook, is who Ray Cadell says. Now, Ray lives in the county. I also live in the county. I'm following this closely for obvious reasons. My business is called I Love CVille, like I've said. He follows it closely for obvious reasons. He's a real estate agent who does transactions in the city and the county. Right. Let me throw first Lloyd Snook to you. Right. Lloyd Snook is in this building, my neighbor right around the corner. Your thoughts as Lloyd Snook as a candidate for council?
Yeah, so and the first thing I want to say is because I now work for the City Housing Authority, I can't be as overtly political as I have been in the past.
Fair.
But I will say, I've known Lloyd for many years. He's a solid guy. He's very thoughtful. He's been part of what some of us have occasionally derisively called the Democratic establishment in Charlottesville.
He was the one-time chair of the Democratic Party.
And he's always careful. He's always quick to come back and say there is no Democratic establishment in Charlottesville. And so, but
which we know is not true.
But Lloyd's a good guy, and I think you have to consider somebody like Lloyd Snook to be a front runner. Just because of his experience. A lot of this, in terms of winning local races, comes down to name recognition, right? And so name recognition and longevity in the community, do you have connections here? Do you know the community? Do people know you? Have you been visible? Have you been active? that often carries the day, right? And so it was interesting during Mayor Walker's campaign when we were talking about sort of her attributes that she brought to the race and would bring to council. The one attribute that voters resonated to most when we were doing voter engagement was the fact that she grew up here. First counselor in decades that has actually grew up in Charlottesville, that went through schools here, put her own kids through schools here. That's huge, and that people really resonate. That really resonates.
Works for
with
the
people.
city.
Yeah, so she's been known, she's been active. Lloyd has also been very active. He didn't necessarily, I don't think he grew up here per se, but he's been here most of his life, very involved in the community, very visible. So I think that gives him a head start over maybe some other candidates who don't have that track record. But having said that, I think, again, are people going to support candidates? You look at a guy like Michael Payne, who also he did grow up in Albemarle County, so he is a local. But you could argue that Michael is kind of in that same mold as Mayor Walker in terms of saying, we really got to address some of these fundamentals, and we can't, and we got to be bold about it. We got to get creative, and we can't just kind of nibble around the edges. So it's going to be interesting how this all plays out.
It's going to be so interesting. And I love this stuff.
Yeah,
I love this stuff.
As
a former reporter and radio broadcaster, TV broadcaster, this is the kind of stuff I live for, because it just gets me I love the news.
Yeah.
You touched on Michael Payne and Lloyd Snook, two very different candidates. Michael Payne, very young, mid-20s, tied to Habitat for Humanity, affordable housing expert, grew up in the community. Lloyd Snook, 60-plus, defense attorney. He being characterized by some on social, and I think it's something that he needs to be mindful of, as being the old white guard of Charlottesville, and maybe stigmatized or painted as opposed to change. The Lloyd I know does not fit that stigma.
Right.
He does not fit that stigma. Michael Payne being characterized on social, being characterized as a candidate as being, how does a guy in his early 20s have the perspective to lead a community post A12? Right. Maybe also unfair, but that's how politics work.
Yeah, sure.
Talk to me what you think.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are, I can understand those perspectives. I would never dismiss anybody because they're old and white. I think that's very unfair. Yeah. Because I'm well on my way to being old and white myself. So.
And you're not an ageist or a racist.
But
you're a nice guy.
But and I would also not dismiss Michael Payne because anybody who has been attending city council meetings over the last couple of years knows that whenever Michael stands up and offers
he's got something
thoughts,
to say.
He is very thoughtful. Yeah. He does his homework. He's hardworking. He helped to start the local chapter of Indivisible Charlottesville. He's been involved in mobilizing people. Would never in a million years discount his ability to be a really effective city councilor. He's articulate. Yeah. He's invested in the community. I love the thought that he's put in the affordable housing issue in particular, but also he's been a champion on climate change solutions and the Green New Deal, and he has led the effort to push the city to disinvest in fossil fuel companies. I mean, this is a guy who's really got his act together, and I think brings a lot to the table. And again, I can't endorse candidates,
you're just talking.
I think they are. And then there's obviously other candidates. Sina McGill is running. She actually was involved in all her affordable housing and homelessness work of her own, and is a very thoughtful person. I'm interested to see how her campaign takes form over the next few months. We don't know if any of the current councilors are going to run again. As you said earlier, they obviously, incumbents tend to have an advantage, and so it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. But it is a big opportunity to affect the future of Charlottesville. So I hope people do pay attention. And one of the things that always bugged me, one of the things I really appreciate about your show, is the fact that people tend to pay a lot more attention to national politics, statewide politics. They don't know as much, and they don't pay as close attention to local politics, even though the decisions that are made in Charlottesville City Council or Albemarle County
impact people more than what happens in the White House.
Exactly.
It's so obvious to me.
I know.
God.
But everything about the way we live our lives, our schools that our kids attend, our neighborhoods, our shopping districts, our the parks, the fire, police, all of the sidewalks, bike lanes, I mean, all this is decided at the local level, for the most part, and funded at the local level largely. And so I really commend what you're doing to try to bring more attention to what's happening at the local level.
Sina McGill is going to join us on the show February 1st. We're going to welcome her to the program so you understand her platform and her forum and what she stands for. The whole object of this program is not to endorse a candidate, but introduce you to the candidates so you have more ammunition come the June 11th primary. I'm here to tell you guys, the November election is not going to win the council. Is not going to determine the council. It's the June 11th primary. So if you're not out there,
but here's the thing, Jerry, is that that's conventional wisdom, and that's generally been true.
Okay.
However,
Mayor Walker disproves that.
Right. Mayor Walker disproved that.
Right. But
and
Lloyd called her. Let me throw this to you.
Yeah.
Lloyd called her on the show, and he has tremendous respect for her.
Yeah.
He said in a lot of ways, Mayor Walker's victory, in some ways, is an anomaly and not the norm because it came on the coattails after 8/12. When a lot of stuff was in the ecosystem that otherwise were not. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's there's some truth to that. Although, if again, she brought a lot to the table, and she kicked off her campaign well before August 12th.
He wasn't marginalizing her.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah. But there was sort of the perfect storm.
Right. That's what he called it. Exactly. Perfect storm.
Right. But I even had A12 not happen, I think she would have given everybody a run for their money because of the attributes she brought to the table, and because she grew up here. She was known. She's been involved. She had probably attended more city council meetings, work sessions, public hearings, et cetera, than all the other candidates combined. And so she was really well versed, and people really liked what she had to say. So, so it is an anomaly, obviously, because it's the only time it's happened in 70 years. So it's by definition an anomaly. However, now that sort of ceiling, that glass ceiling, has been shattered, there is, depending on the strength of the candidate, if there's an independent candidate that steps forward after June 11th, they could pose an interesting.
I'm going to cut to the chase here. I know you can't cut to the chase. Right. I'm going to cut to the chase here, and I'm not trying to marginalize the guys. Right. The fellas that are running as independents right now, one of them has already lost. Okay, he's run for council before and has lost. Right. Running as an independent in the city of Charlottesville, I'm not going to call it a death nail in your campaign, but I'm going to say it's going to very, 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 very much create more headaches and hurdles and hardship that you would have to clear as opposed to someone who chooses to run for a Democrat. Bob Fenwick is a perfect example of this, Mayor Norris. I just called you Mayor Norris. It's a perfect example, Dave, here. Jump in here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think generally you're correct. And in fact, the night that Nikuyah Walker told us, her campaign crew, that she had decided to run as an independent.
You were there that night?
Yeah.
Oh, this
as
is
opposed to a Democrat. I literally stood there and hung my head, and I was just devastated because I thought for a fact that was a death knell for her campaign. Michael Payne and I, interestingly enough, kind of huddled with her after that meeting and did our level best to try to convince her to reconsider, and said, we said, nobody has won in 70 years as an independent. Like you got to run as a Democrat. And I have said on many occasions since, Jerry, I have never been happier in my life to have been proven wrong about something than when I told her she couldn't win as an independent. And she blew us all away. And on election night, it was just really one of the thrills of my life is to see not only did she win, but she came in first place. And
so you're basically basing all this to disprove the statement that I said that it may not necessarily come down to the June 11th primary to determine the
I'm
three
just saying,
council
depending
spots.
on who runs. You're right. I don't think any of the independents who are in the race now have the
name recognition
that she brought to that election.
Yeah.
But there may be other candidates in the wings that may announce as independents. So I don't want to completely discount the idea that somebody could get elected as an independent.
Very good stuff. Let's turn what he said into a sizzle reel there, because I feel like having some intel of what Mayor Walker was doing when she said she was going to go as an independent, people would love to know that.
Yeah.
That was fascinating to me.
No,
because you were clearly a trusted advisor, a strategist, someone who had previously done this, that was working behind the scenes to offer his perspective to help her.
Yeah, no, I was happy to support her from day one of her campaign, and I think she's doing good stuff.
Here's a crazy thing: is when Councilor Hill and Mayor Walker, when they won their elections, the vote count in November, Mayor Walker had less than 8,000 votes. Councilor Hill had less than Mayor Walker. which was still less than 8,000 votes. Where I'm going with this is the city of Charlottesville has a population of roughly 50,000 people.
Right.
8,000 people, which is what? Not a huge percentage,
right.
are determining the leaders of our community.
Right.
That horrifies me. That scares the shit out of me. Okay.
right. Which is why we need more people paying attention
Right.
and getting involved and learning about the candidates, learning about the issues. So yeah.
Do you realize that if more people do not get involved with stuff like this, how people with the ubiquitous nature and popularity of social media can use a platform like mine to run and win? Do you know how easily?
Are you announcing your candidacy?
I am not. My wife would kill me if that was the case. But 8,000. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
8,000 votes. Freaking Donald Trump proved
But the
that
irony,
he could use
right.
the celebrity to win.
No, I know. And the irony, though, is, back in the day, I was the last city council candidate nominated through the old system where the Democrats used to have a mass meeting, and it was like 500 people would get into a room and decide who the Democratic candidates would be. And at that point, basically, whoever got the Democratic nomination was going to win in November. So basically, it was 500 people deciding who our electors,
That's
local
terrifying.
right.
That's
so now it's slightly more democratic,
Right,
in that
slightly.
the Democrats now have a open primary, but still, when it comes to the general election, it's crazy, Jerry, because when we have a presidential election, we
So
can
many more
easily
people
get
vote.
like 60-70% of people turning out, right? Back when we used to have city council only elections, we considered it a huge turnout if like 25% of the voters showed up, and so we need to change that.
20% of Charlottesville determined 2 city council spots in the last election.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And there is no presidential election this year. So I am doing everything humanly possible with my forum and platform to let folks know that the June 11th primary and the November election will undoubtedly determine 3 spots on city council and undoubtedly determine the future of the city of Charlottesville and undoubtedly determine Albemarle County and Central Virginia's future, because if you don't realize that the city of Charlottesville, Fluvanna County, Louisa County, Orange County, Albemarle County, Greene County, Nelson County, Augusta County, and all the other freaking counties are directly tied to the success of Charlottesville, you're closed-minded and not a visionary whatsoever, and I'm not trying to knock you, okay? It's a fact. Chris and Martin, thank you for joining us. Anja Andalek, who owns Fig Bistro on the corner, thank you for joining us. If you can like and share the stream, we would tremendously appreciate this. Michael Guthrie is giving you some big-time props. He says Charlottesville Abundant Life is doing a great job helping people in the way Dave Norris was just talking about, helping kids in school and also adults figure out financing so they can purchase their own home. Charlottesville Abundant Life Ministry, I believe, is in that Orangedale neighborhood.
Right. A great organization, one of the many local nonprofits that's doing amazing work in our community, and I agree with Michael. Got to give him a lot of props.
Mayor Walker goes on in the commission and the city council meeting, and she puts the spotlight on nonprofits, and she wants transparency with where the money's going.
Sure.
Where I got some, and I have a lot of respect for Mayor Walker. Where I got even more respect for Mayor Walker was when she voted against the allocation of $500,000 to the New Hill Development Corporation for revitalization and allocation in the Star Hill neighborhood. The folks that make up the New Hill Development Corporation, Linda Harrell, who I've invited on the show multiple times. Linda, when are you going to come on the program, Linda? I really would like for you to come on the show. Mayor Walker voted against this allocation. A lot of the folks that make up the New Hill Development Corporation in the Star Hill neighborhood are the folks that got Mayor Walker into office and helped her win her election. So I gained respect for her that she was willing to say no to this, because it showed she truly was fearless and needed more information on this. I would like to throw to you, as a former mayor, what kind of accountability measures are put into place for monitoring the allocation of taxpayer dollars to nonprofits and then their eventual performance with that money.
Right. So, there is a system in place. We have this, it's called the Agency Budget Review Team, which is a group of it's a lot of volunteers and agency or city staff that review all these requests for funding and make recommendations to the city and the county for funding and assess the impact. But I think the question that Mayor Walker and others have asked is, are they are basically we just funding things that we've always been funding and not expecting more in terms of impact, in terms of actually moving people up the ladder. And then so that it begs the question, how do you assess that, right? And so one of the things that she talked about a lot in her campaign was we need to do more to talk to people in the community, supposedly the people that these organizations are serving, and say which of these organizations are actually delivering, which of them are actually producing results in terms of helping you and your neighbors climb the ladder, right? And so, which we don't do a very good job of right now, is actually getting community input on these allocations. And so, again, I go back to whether you're a conservative Republican or a liberal Democrat, if you're a taxpayer, you should be concerned with how your dollars are being used and making sure that they are making the biggest possible impact, and that we are doing everything we can to help people climb the ladder. And so, so I really commend her for to taking that on and asking the hard questions and occasionally voting against things when she's not seeing impact or not seeing transparency or not getting her questions answered to her satisfaction. I think it's, people often say, well, councilors disagree with each other and they don't have a unified front. I think that's BS. Like, council doesn't need to have a unified front all the time.
Interesting.
It's perfect. I was often on the tail end of a 1-4 or 2-3 vote on council, and that's fine. Like, I think, this idea that they all have to be, it has to be 5-0 on everything is, I just think that's nonsense. And I think it's okay that they disagree sometimes. I think it's okay that they argue sometimes. We want to get work done, and we want to argue in a constructive, disagree in a constructive way. But I think it's perfectly good. I think it's good and healthy to have a divergence of opinion and people occasionally voting against each other, because we'll get a better result in the end.
Question from the chat box. And George Collier, thank you for joining us, guys. If you could like the stream and share the stream and keep Charlottesville in a positive spotlight, that would be huge. That would mean a lot to us here. We're talking Charlottesville and all things that are involved in the news cycle in CVille. Question from the chat box says, for you, Dave, do you think that the UVA Community Engagement Task Force that President Ryan is putting together can make a difference in making a positive change in our community?
Well, I think it can, yes. I'm glad that they're at least asking for input from the community. I hope they take it seriously. We've been sort of pushing UVA for years to be a better community partner when it comes to, for instance, the wages that they pay. They can clearly afford to pay their lowest paid workers higher wages. They choose not to. And that's one where I do believe, 'cause when President Ryan was on the faculty at UVA, on the law school faculty, he signed a living wage petition. So I think he gets it and he's going to do his part. I trust, I hope that he's going to do his part to work on that issue. The big question mark there is, I think, so UVA, they know that they can lift the wages for their own employees. Where they've been hesitant, if not in opposition, has to do with their contract employees.
Right. Their subs.
They say they don't have clear authority from the General Assembly to require contractors to pay a living wage. But guess what? Neither did the city of Charlottesville. And the city of Charlottesville, which is also a political subdivision of the state, just as UVA is, said for lack of clear authority either way, because state law doesn't say we can and state law doesn't say we can't. So the city of Charlottesville says we're going to do it. This was like 20 years ago now. And I hope UVA will take a similar stance. Housing, UVA really can be more, we've been talking about affordable housing. There's a lot certainly they can do, even something as simple as an employer-assisted housing program with their own staff, their own employees, to allow them to help them buy homes or whatever it is. I think that UVA can be more of a force for good in the community. Obviously, there's a lot of good things that happen in Charlottesville because of UVA, but there's more that they can do.
Good answer right there. Judy McCarthy Harbin, thank you for interacting with the feed and liking it. Please share it and like it, guys. A lot of questions coming in for you here. Piggyback with what you're talking about UVA. The chat box would like to know, why doesn't the university contribute to the West Main streetscape? We're talking about tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer allocation. Granted, there is a match. that's coming in to help with this. Why should UVA not be expected to contribute to development along West Main, considering that's only going to make the university look better? From my standpoint, I was like, hell yeah. Why doesn't UVA do this? I mean, it's so obvious, right?
Right. And I don't know the ins and outs of the funding on that project, but absolutely. I mean, UVA is one of the main stakeholders on West Main Street and University Avenue, and so they should be part of the funding puzzle for that project. Absolutely.
The West Main streetscape, the beef I'm hearing from folks is the allocation of tens of millions of dollars to West Main and its TLC and its revitalization, as opposed to that same money being allocated to places like schools and to teachers to improve that infrastructure and that system. It's an interesting dynamic, and you as a former mayor and former council member had to balance, okay, is the money going to go here or here? There's only a finite money.
Absolutely.
How do you handle that balance? Give us some insight.
Yeah, no, I mean, you do have to make some hard choices, and I think our council was one that, took that very seriously, and we did make some hard choices. One of the things I appreciated about the city manager that we had at the time was his philosophy was, when times are good and the economy is strong, you save up money in the capital improvement fund. You don't necessarily spend it all. So we would end up the year with multi-million-dollar surpluses. A lot of that we would put into the fund, not spend it right away, but put it into long-term investments. And then when the economy goes sour, as it did, unfortunately, when I was in office, we had the Great Recession. But then you aren't cutting into basic services. You may be cutting back on some of those capital improvements and long-term investments, but be wise and be smart with your money is basically the bottom line there. And so, during the 8 years I was on council, we never once increased the property tax. I think we only increased the cigarette tax at one point, and they increased the rain tax against my wishes. But in general, I think we were very careful with the taxpayer dollar, and so you have to make hard choices, and that means you can't always do it. But also it goes back to the point I made earlier, which is how do you leverage other resources? So when I was in office, we created the Charlottesville Housing Fund. And we were able to build or preserve or renovate hundreds of units of affordable housing. Did we solve the problem? Absolutely not. But we were able to do a lot more. Not a single one of those units was government owned. We're working with the private sector, with the nonprofit sector to help address that particular problem. And I think that's the mindset we need.
You connect with people. It's obvious. People are loving your answers, and you're connecting with them. Thank you, Michael Buchensky, for sharing the feed. John Kelly PR.
I love John Kelly.
John Kelly watching now. Thank you, John, for liking and sharing the feed. Keep the spotlight on Charlottesville. The whole concept of the show is putting Charlottesville in a positive spotlight. Karen Straley from Animal Connections, one of the rescue groups in the area. Thank you for watching with us, with Dave and I. Let's talk about taxes. And always a hot button when we talk taxes. Let's talk about real estate taxes and increased assessments. And increased assessments potentially pricing people out of neighborhoods that they lived in for long periods of time. We understand that there are assessment rebate programs out there tied to folks and their income and helping subsidize the increase of taxes so they can stay in their home. That is for a certain demographic. The other demographic that does not fit that criteria is saying to me and wants me to ask you, what do we do about neighborhoods like Belmont? I lived in Belmont in 2006 because it was the guys, as we left the UVA bubble, to go downtown. We were trying to spread our wings, and we go to Belmont because you can stumble home from the bars. You totally get where you know what I'm saying. So now where I'm going with this is in 2006, 4 guys shared a 3-bedroom house. One guy climbed a rope ladder and lived in the attic because that's what we could afford. $1,300, and we chopped it up 4 ways. That home now is $2,500. Probably still looks the same and has no improvement and has a waiting list of people. Talk to me about how tax assessments impact neighborhoods, how a neighborhood like Belmont has become the way it is, where it pretty much can only be afforded by empty nesters and people that can buy homes that are $500,000 or more.
And do you live in Belmont? I think you do, right? I have for most of the time in Charlottesville. I don't currently, but I mean, my first house that I purchased in Belmont, paid $72,500 for. That was in 2000.
Wow.
Now worth well over $200,000. Bought another house a few years later on Green Street in Belmont. It was funny because I paid $104,000 for that house, and when I moved in, the nice elderly woman across the street who's one of these people who reads the real estate listings in the newspaper. You know, she came across the street to welcome me to the neighborhood. She says, "You might want to contact the Daily Progress because there was an error on your real estate listing. It says you paid $104,000 for that house." And I said, "Ma'am, I actually did pay $104,000. She thought it was outrageous that somebody would pay over $100,000 for a house in Belmont. You know, back in the day, Belmont was considered a really
working class.
And really tough neighborhood.
Yeah.
I know teachers back in the day when teachers used to do house calls, you know, and visit students in their homes. Teachers often wouldn't go into Belmont; it was considered too dangerous, you know. So, which is ironic now. So Belmont, yeah, it's taken off, so one of the things we did when I was in office was to create that tax rebate program. We went to the General Assembly and got permission. And this council, to their credit, has expanded it and expanded the size of the rebate, expanded the eligibility for the rebate, which is really helpful for those homeowners who are of limited means, who may be elderly fixed budget, and as their properties are assessments are going through the roof, they can't pay those taxes. It's been driving a lot of people out. So that program has helped. It's one tool in the tool chest, but we clearly need more. And there's been a lot of flipping going on. Sometimes, you know, there's a positive side to flipping, which is that homeowner gets a windfall. You know,
on the back end,
right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm saying the homeowner that's been in the community forever, they're making a nice little pot of money off of that home that they've been sitting on for, in some cases, generations. However, it's changing the demographics. It's changing a lot about our community. I don't think it's always for the best. In fact, it's often not. And so we've got to get smarter about how we impact how do we address those negative impacts of gentrification, and we've got to get smarter. I mean, there's a whole aspect to this, Jerry, which Belmont to me brings to mind. You mentioned it earlier. It's historically a working class neighborhood. Early Street, where I bought the first home. All those houses were built as first-time homes for people working at the X Factory. You know, Woolen Mills, where I live now, a lot of those homes were built for workers at the Woolen Mills. You know, those jobs we've been hemorrhaging by the thousands.
The entire country is.
The entire country is.
Yeah.
But there are communities that have done a good job of reclaiming those jobs, growing that middle-class job base. And we have done a shoddy job of that here in Charlottesville and Albemarle. And it's to our own detriment because we have a thriving retail and service sector economy. We have a thriving sort of
education,
technology, defense industry, biotech. That's doing great.
The hedge funds are crushing it.
Right. The jobs in the middle we've been losing by the thousands. All the factories in the area, not all of them, but many of them have shut down. That historically was the best avenue into the middle class for people who weren't necessarily on a college track. But back in the day, you know, those families on Early Street, you can get a decent job at a factory without a college education, raise enough money to buy your own starter home, make enough money to buy your own starter home, retire with a pension, you know, send your kids to college. Like that's how we built the American middle class. And we, to our own detriment, have been losing those jobs and not doing nearly enough to reclaim them. One of the very last things that I did when I was in office was to hold a skilled trades summit to try to figure out how do we recapture some of these skilled trades jobs. And I just don't think we're doing nearly enough because for lack of those kinds of jobs, so many people are getting stuck in these dead-end, low-wage jobs. And then with the market pressures we're seeing for lack of affordable housing, gentrification, all that's pushing people out. It's just we're not doing enough to strengthen the hand of the working class in this community.
You have some friends on the feed that you're a light guy. Kristen Davis Singh says, "Tell Dave you're too young to keep saying back in the day." So she's giving you some props. She's saying you're crushing it as well. Ray, who's been watching for a while, and guys, if you could do us a favor, like and share this stream so we could get more attention on Dave in Charlottesville. Ray, who's been watching, and I respect what Ray has to say. He says, "Dave, what do you think in general about the need for city and city hall to work closer with guys like Keith Woodard?" I'll give a little background on that and then get your answer. Keith Woodard of Woodard Properties, one of the premier developers in Charlottesville. I think one of the developers that does it right. He planned an $80 million mixed-use development on Water Street. That was going to be the home of the city market on the lower level, and then penthouses or condos above it that had varying price points. He had $1.2 million of his own money invested into underground infrastructure, and also 2 years of opportunity cost, Dave, of his time trying to get the plans through commission and through council. And then finally, Keith threw his hands in the air and said, to hell with $1.2 million. Would be nice to be able to do that. And now it's the city market's in limbo, and this Water Street project is no more. So back to Ray Cadell's question, as I put the perspective in play, do you think City Hall should be working closer with guys like Keith Woodard?
Well, I think that project was a complete missed opportunity, and there was some discussion about, because to a certain extent priorities changed from the time he started that project to when it actually came to a head. And the community got, I think, a lot more cognizant of the need to address this affordable housing issue we've been talking about. And the fact that they were essentially just throwing some crumbs at the affordable housing issue, I think, really did not help their case very, very much at all. And they were meeting the letter of the law when it comes to this density bonus and the developer contribution to affordable housing, but there was strong pressure.
This is basically what you said,
right.
And then I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah,
What you basically said was Keith Woodard's project started before A12, and then Keith Woodard's project was going to be finished after A12, and people and their thoughts and how they went about their viewpoints and perspective in Charlottesville changed because of A12. And then affordable housing became more of an issue post A12 when Keith was trying to start and launch this project. Also, he said that market conditions had changed in that the cost of goods and the cost of labor had increased, which forced Keith to add another floor to his project to help cover the cost of the increased cost of goods and the increased cost of labor. Back to you, former Mayor Dave Norris.
I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said, and so there was an opportunity to, there was discussion about basically not just creating these 16 units over on Harris Street that were going to be somewhat affordable, but actually taking the economic, the revenues from that project and basically putting it into a lockbox and using those revenues, which would amount to a little under $1 million a year, to underwrite a large bond for affordable housing. You could, for $1 million a year, you could underwrite a bond almost $20 million. Then you're talking about a project that's going to spin off potentially hundreds of units of affordable housing, had that deal come together the way that some of us wanted it to come together. And when it didn't come together, I just think it wasn't terribly compelling given today's political atmosphere and the need to get our arms around this affordable housing issue. It's like we've got so little city land left. This is a prime piece of city-owned real estate. We want to make sure we're using this to address community needs, and I think it was a missed opportunity.
Now, missed opportunity because of what specifically? Farmers market doesn't have a home. Missed opportunity because we could have had a ton of disposable income patronizing the merchants downtown. Missed opportunity because of the tax, the back end real estate tax
all of the
assessments.
above. All of the above.
Because like that
city market, the city market was the original driver for that project. We had commission after commission, working group after working group, consultant after consultant look at this for over a decade. And Charlottesville, we love to talk about things, so we love to study things.
Right.
And so, and the end result of all of this work that we did to try to figure out, the city market has been in temporary quarters for over 20 years now. Like, that's crazy. It's one of the crown jewels of downtown.
That's what we call
the city market.
Yeah.
I love the city market.
Me too.
And I know you've been trying to think about
Kim's Market,
right? Kim's Market, where it could go. I've lived in other communities where there's farmers markets are huge. It's like it's a centerpiece of the community, and so. We wanted to find a permanent solution and give it the resources that it needed and give it the amenities that it needed and deserved. And the conclusion of all that work was, let's take that spot and create a permanent market there. They
took the RFPs.
As part of a mixed income development. But the other thing that got lost in this whole discussion, Jerry, was that little parcel there was phase one. There was a phase two across the street. The idea, because people were saying, well, it makes for a really kind of crowded city market when you're going to be building some residential and office space here. That doesn't leave much room for the market. But what people forgot was that was half of the market. Like, eventually they were going to do a mirror development on the other side, double the size of the market, create a really cool plaza there, a public plaza, have a mixed income project, have revenue coming in that we could use for things potentially like an affordable housing bond, and I think it was unfortunate, though the way it kind of crashed and burned. But again, a missed opportunity. I wish it had gone in different directions.
James Watson, thank you for watching. Thank you, James, for joining us. Tony from Chaps, thank you for watching and for sharing the feed. If you could give it a like, if you could give it a share, that mean a lot to us. Harris, our director, let's turn his insight into the Woodard project into a sizzle reel, because I thought it was very insightful and straightforward. Let me throw this to you here. The Woodard project has become a microcosm for a large chunk of the community as a leverage point to say that council's more focused on social justice than economic growth. The statement, I'm concerned about that. And I think the first thing that's being pointed to after the statement, social justice over economic growth, is $80 million Keith Woodard project. That's just, they're going hand in hand. Your thoughts on council having the right priorities, the wrong priorities? Are the priorities on the same balance or judges scale, even?
Right.
Show is yours.
Well, I think if you look at the grand arc of Charlottesville, we have invested a lot in economic development. And again, we're doing very well in certain sectors. We haven't done nearly enough to build the base of jobs or rebuild that base of jobs that are going to help people climb into the middle class. But there's clearly an argument to be made we haven't done enough to address some of these entrenched problems, particularly as it plays out in terms of racial inequities in our community, which are serious and they're undeniable. And you look at the
Vinegar Hill
achievement gap in our schools,
Yeah.
Vinegar Hill, you look at housing inequities, health inequities, criminal justice inequities. These are real problems. And so I don't think addressing social justice issues has to come at the expense of being a healthy, thriving community. In fact, I think they go hand in hand, and that we're never going to be a truly healthy, truly thriving community as long as so many of our residents are left behind. And so we have to do both. I do not cast aspersion on all development and all developers. I know Keith personally. I think he's a good guy. As developers go, he's somebody who wants to do good in the community. Obviously, we were working with Coran now. There's other people that I've worked with over the years. In fact, my philosophy about development was, generally speaking, if we're going to have growth, which we clearly have had, I would much rather see that development occur in our urban core rather than to see it metastasize through suburban sprawl.
Yeah, and then we're Fredericksburg or Northern Virginia,
which is
want.
hell.
It's hell, right?
And so I was generally in favor of doing creative urban infill development because I don't want to see our forests and farmlands get continued, paved over and suburban sprawl just go unchecked. But we have to do a better job of addressing this whole other set of issues, otherwise we're going to continue to be a community where too many of our residents are left behind.
Dude, that was so good. That's a sizzle reel, Harris. That was so good. See, that's why you connect with people. I mean, you take very complicated things and make them approachable and understandable. And I think so much of it is complicated. Like talking with Rory Solzenberg about the Planning Commission, this guy's like, it is so complicated. He goes, it's complicated for me. But what I'm trying to do is use the forum to humanize it, localize it, personalize it, and give it a spotlight. And I think that's what we're doing. We filled 70 minutes already. It's felt like 7. Can I have 5 more minutes?
Sure.
How about we throw Fifeville into the mix?
Okay,
I like talking about Fifeville because I have friends in Fifeville. Fifeville at one time was an African-American, it still is, an African-American community, and a lot of the folks that lived in Fifeville were working at the University of Virginia, where they could walk to and from the hospital, to and from grounds, and stay close to where they work. Now what's happening is, and I have friends that are doing this, you have doctors who are here for medical school, or you have folks that work at the hospital that are scooping up the homes.
Right.
And now when you look at Fifeville, you see a lot of the scrubs, the medical clothing that people are wearing. You see a lot of nurses and doctors, and I think the authenticity of the neighborhood may be in peril.
Absolutely.
I think one of the key buildings, Kim's Market, is now going through commission and council with an out-of-town developer trying to do potentially affordable housing there, but concerned that he's not going to get the approval needed. So the owner of the market has got a short-term tenant in place to help cover the cost of maintaining the property.
Right.
Where I'm going with this is, I think the future of CVille is 100% at a crossroads. The show is yours, Dave Norris.
So I agree, and it's a similar dynamic that we've been seeing in other neighborhoods.
CVille reminds me of Belmont like 30 years ago.
Right. So one of the things I like about what Michael Payne has been talking about is community-driven solutions, right, and community-owned economic development, community, so this whole public housing redevelopment project is a resident-directed initiative. We're working hand in hand with our residents. And so I want to see us encourage and foster that kind of bottom-up strategy when it comes to housing preservation, when it comes to maintaining the integrity and character of our neighborhoods so that they don't become gentrified and we don't see the displacement or more of the displacement that we've already been seeing. And so we've got to invest in community-driven solutions. I know there are nonprofits out there that are trying. Habitat has done some work in CVille. Other groups, My Housing Alliance, tried to do some work there with mixed results. So we've got to invest in solutions that are going to help people stay in the neighborhoods, to build wealth, and then to transfer that wealth to ensuing generations. Otherwise, we're just going to see just mass displacement, and that doesn't really serve anybody very well. And so CVille, it is at the crossroads right now, and they've got a pretty good, pretty healthy neighborhood association.
Herb Porter, one of the big guys there.
Herb is a great guy.
He's a great guy.
Herb is one of those mainstays of Charlottesville. I wish more people would listen to what he has to say.
If you want to hear Herb Porter, go to the bar at Fuzzy's Tacos around happy hour. Look for a kind gentleman that has short, dreaded hair that may be wearing a leather jacket.
That's right.
He's going to be sitting at the bar. Proud veteran.
Right.
He is happy to talk about CVille and Charlottesville. I've had over many beers a conversation with Herb.
Right.
And we disagree, but he does it in a way that's legit.
Right. And there are people like Herb all over the community who have invested their lives here, and they're being pushed out. Like the working class, not just the African American working class, but the working class across the board is being pushed out of our community. And we've got to do more to listen to them and to work with them to help preserve what's good about our community and make sure we continue to be thriving for
What do you say to the entrepreneurs? Okay, so I am a self-made guy.
Yeah.
Started this business almost 11 years ago with my entire life savings.
Right.
$32,000 put into the business. And then had no clients for 7 months.
Right.
Was horrified. Was going to the Panda Garden Buffet on Emmett Street by my old stomping grounds, Lambeth Field, and was taking Ziploc bags into the Panda Garden Buffet, and when the folks were not looking, was taking food from my plate, scooping it in a Ziploc bag, and it was my food for 3 days and my dog's food for 3 days. Also would go to McDonald's for the $3 double cheeseburger, and that double cheeseburger was my meal for the day when I wasn't eating stolen Chinese food. But what ended up happening was we did well by one person, they told somebody else, did well by that next person, they told somebody else, and now we own 40% of this building, have 23 tenants, have a good workforce, doing well.
Right.
I'm playing devil's advocate with you.
And props to you.
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate with you. It's just, I, as someone who started something from zero, had 8 months of unable to feed himself and his dog, and has been able to build something, what do you say to the folks, and I'm not saying I share this perspective, I'm doing this for the sake of the show. What do you say for to the folks that say capitalism and entrepreneurs and the market will figure out the market conditions themselves, and we just need the market and capitalism to run its course, and that's going to determine where the fruit falls from the tree?
Yeah, no, I think I'm a big supporter and fan of small businesses and entrepreneurs. I think some of the best employers in our country started out as little garage-based businesses and whatnot. We've got a lot of amazingly talented and dedicated small business people here in Charlottesville, and they're creating jobs, they're hiring people, they're adding so much to the vitality of our economy and our community. So I think entrepreneurs, props to the entrepreneurial class. Does that mean that free market solutions are the best in every situation? Clearly in housing, that's not true, right? And housing is one where and I can't blame, like private developers make no money building housing for people at 0 to 30% of AMI, right? There's no money in it, right? Which is why we need government to play a role in bringing down some of those costs and helping it make it attractive and doable.
Make them want to do it.
Make them want to do it,
Yeah.
right? And so now, parking, on the other hand, in my mind, is one that actually lends itself to free market solutions, and we don't do enough to unleash the private sector to address this parking issue, particularly downtown. And instead, so now we're going to build, spend tens of millions of taxpayer dollars to build a parking garage, which a private company offered to build for free. So I think that's one where we need more free market thinking. But in terms of the economy, absolutely. Like, we've got to be supporting small business. Obviously, small businesses in the country employ more people than large businesses, and I'm a small business person myself. I have a little side gig as a wedding officiant.
You're crushing it.
I love doing it.
Yeah.
I get to work with great people like Ray Cadell and others in the wedding industry. It's a part-time gig, but it brings in, I've got 2 kids in college, and so it helps me bring in a little extra income. I know what it takes to run a little business. And I wish, in fact, that we did more to, here's my, if you want to cut to the chase, Jerry, my big gripe about American capitalism is not capitalistic enough, in that there are so many barriers to entry to the free enterprise system for people who can't understand the complexity of the tax code, of regulatory, provisions, regulatory measures. I've spent a lot of time in recent years over in Ghana and West Africa, thanks to the Sister City partnership we have in Ghana. And, the barrier to entry to the economic system there is, do you have a table where you can go and set up at the city market and sell your wares, right? They make it as easy as possible for people to become entrepreneurs, right? We don't do that here. We do a crappy job here of encouraging and supporting entrepreneurs. And you shouldn't have to have a master's degree to figure. I mean, I have a master's degree and I can't figure out the tax code, right? And so it shouldn't be that complex, And there are so many people who have skills in our communities and who are, in many cases, kind of operating in the underground economy because of all the barriers to entry that we've put into place for them to come above ground. You look at a place like Southwood Mobile Home Community, where Habitat's doing their work. There's dozens of entrepreneurs there, very few of whom are actually like,
business license,
business
LLC,
license, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they're conducting business, right? They're making,
trade deals.
Right.
Yeah, I totally know what you're
saying.
saying.
So, and that's happening throughout our community. And I really wish we did more to support, these small-time entrepreneurs and help people climb the ladder.
No, keep going, dude. I'm not sure. Sizzle reel this whole thing from my entrepreneur to this. This is money.
So one of the things we're looking at with redevelopment of public housing is we've got so many residents who live in public housing who have skills, right, and have the desire to climb the ladder and to utilize their skills to improve their own financial situation. There's so many disincentives to that right now, so we got to figure out how do we change that incentive, those disincentives. But also, like, given the fact that this enterprise of this endeavor of redeveloping public housing, we're talking about $150 million project. So one of the hard questions we're asking now is, how do we recycle as much money that is possible in our communities and hire residents to do the work of redevelopment, of renovating and rebuilding their own communities, right? Why bring in outside employees when you got residents who have skills, who have the desire to work, and including residents who may want to start a business and get some of these contracts, you're doing landscaping, doing drywall, whatever it is, and so we're learning about best practices in other communities where they're using redevelopment to improve the lives of the residents there. They should be the first to benefit from this, right? And so, again, it's how do you reduce barriers to entry to people who want to climb the ladder, and we should be doing everything we can to do that.
That should be the end of the sizzle reel. Start it with the entrepreneurial story I shared to there and call it Dave Norris Entrepreneur. Kristen Davis Singh, terrific conversation. Keep it going. I look forward to watching the rest. Ross Williams joining us. Charlie Scott, Albemarle High School softball coach, one-time St. Anne's Belfield football coach watching. Des Raj, owner of Extreme Pizza in 5th Street Station, the entrepreneur watching. Will Eppard watching. Kristen Zakos watching. Interim city manager currently watching. Mike Murphy. A lot of people on the stream here. You're crushing it. I have so much to get to. I wish it was like, can I have 5 more minutes?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm having fun. I'm
having fun too.
Let's do it. Yeah.
How about the parking piece?
Yeah.
You have more insight, and you brought up the parking.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even brought it up if you had not brought up the parking.
Yeah.
So you have insight into the Charlottesville parking wars, I think is what we dubbed it. And it was, I'll paint the picture, you give the insight.
Right.
There was a struggle over the Water Street parking garage.
Correct.
Mark Brown and his business on one side, the city of Charlottesville on the other side, Dave Norris in the middle. And you were employed by Mark.
Right.
You were the former mayor
Right.
of Charlottesville.
Right.
I know you were trying to figure out a solution to this as opposed to litigation and nasty newspaper headlines and lawyers that are charging $5.95 an hour.
The lawyers killed it on that deal.
Right. The lawyers,
Right.
I mean, the lawyers mess it all up.
Yeah.
They usually do.
Sometimes there's some good lawyers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
I'm not, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Put into perspective what happened with the Charlottesville parking wars.
Yeah, no, I think you characterize it pretty well. I mean, Mark Brown, I worked for Mark. He and I were friends before I worked for him. He's a smart businessman. He's one of the smartest people I know. He's a really sharp businessman, and had a different attitude about it. Goes back to what I was saying earlier about parking. Really the best way to address parking, I think, is to unleash the private sector to come up with free market solutions to that particular issue, so that we're not having to spend tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, which we could be spending on schools and housing and fire and police and other things, right? And so his whole mentality was, let's figure out ways to incentivize the private sector to step up and provide the parking supply that we need. And then when it came to government, how do we figure out, for instance, how do we improve our public transportation system so that fewer people need to park downtown? Are there solutions like Park and Ride, so that downtown employees, for instance, can get kind of like what UVA does with some of their hospital employees, create a system to get people quickly back and forth to work where they're not having to park and take up some of the valuable parking real estate downtown, but instead can park at a satellite lot and get shuttled in quickly.
Yeah, like the parking lot across from Sweet House on West Main that's always vacant. Have city employees be able to park there and have a shuttle be able to pick them up and then drop them off on the corner of Market and 4th Street. It's so obvious.
Right.
Instead, what's happening is, and I'm contributing to the program, to the problem, I'm in a 2-hour space.
Right.
I'm essentially playing craps or gambling. The parking, I saw him go by the spot already. So since I saw the parking policeman go by the spot, I know that I have some extra juice on the back end because he's already marked the area. So I know that's really a 3.5-hour space today because he just went by. And I'm going to leave my car there for 3.5 hours, okay? I'm just going to be honest, okay?
Duly noted.
He might be watching, but that's what I'm doing.
Mike Murphy's watching. You just...
That's what I'm doing, guys. Okay, I'll even cut to the chase further as an entrepreneur. I got... I think it was 13 $20 tickets in 2018. But for those 13 $20 tickets, which is $260, it saved me $125 a month in parking at the Market Street Garage.
Sure.
I'll just take the tickets.
Right. No, it's a reasonable calculus. So, I mean, so basically what it came down to was, in terms of resolving the parking wars, was we needed to figure out what is that sort of common ground. And what we figured out was we need to get sort of like the big players out of the room, the politicians and the CEOs out of the room, and instead let a couple people hash out an agreement. That was me and Rick Siebert, who's the city's parking czar, and over a series of months, he and I, and then we had support, from different attorneys and whatnot, but basically figure out a path forward that would end the litigation, get Mark what he wanted. Now, the downside is it didn't really get the community what we needed, right? Which was a smart, holistic solution to the parking situation. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge, but at least it resolved that really unfortunate.
Mark made out like a bandit.
Well,
Mark did. You did really. Did you negotiate it for it? You did really well for Mark.
The city made out pretty well too. I mean, so both sides made out pretty well. In fact, the city is actually going to end up making more than Mark ended up making. But yeah, I mean, it was a good resolution. But it is it solving the problem? And from a public policy perspective, there's still a challenge, and we've got to get smarter about it.
Good answer right there. Let's start the sizzle reel from the startup parking all the way to the end. That was good. A couple more, and then we'll wind down here. Landmark Hotel. Rory Stolzenberg comes on the show.
Yeah.
He's a planning commissioner, and we turn this into a sizzle reel that's airing now. And Stolzenberg, who I appreciated like you, straight shooter, cool guy like you.
Yeah.
And Rory says the Landmark Hotel and John Dewberry are paying $65,000 a year in taxes to have that dilapidated skeleton on the mall. 65 G's. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
He says just leave it alone
Yeah,
because all John Dewberry and Dewberry Capital are trying to do is blackmail and extort the city into offering them tax credits to help the development of this project move along. He's basically saying, until you give me what I want, I'm not going to do any construction. So Roy Stolzenberg says, I think we need to let John Dewberry hemorrhage his $65,000 a year. Every time there's snow that has not been cleaned or scraped, take a picture of it, put it on the My CVille app. We see the rats that are running around there. Take a picture of it, put it on the My CVille app so he gets the fines. And then Rory even says, let's shame him on social media relentlessly. Ruin the Dewberry Capital name on social media if humanly possible, because he's been dubbed by Bloomberg News as the emperor of empty lots.
Right.
This is his strategy.
Exactly.
This is the strategy.
Right.
What do you do as the former mayor about the Landmark Hotel?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where Rory's coming from, and there's certainly some value to just doing exactly as he suggested. I think in an ideal world, the better solution would be for the city to be working behind the scenes to assemble an investor group and just buy out Dewberry.
But then the city, Dave, is in the hotel business.
No, sorry. I don't mean for the city to own. I'm saying for the city to take the initiative to identify some investors, private investors, and try to cut a deal and get him out of the picture. Because what he knows is dollars, right? He knows dollar signs. And so that's what he responds to. And I do think it is an eyesore. It is a blight on our downtown. And, you know, whether or not that strategy would work, maybe they've already tried that. I don't know. I know, so I was at the groundbreaking for the hotel back with, blanking on his name.
Halsey Minor?
Halsey Minor.
Yeah, Halsey Minor.
And Lee Danielson. And
yeah.
So I was the mayor at the time when they did the groundbreaking. I still have the glass paperweight from, it wasn't called the Landmark then. Or no, it was called it was called, I forget what it was.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so it was, we were very optimistic, and it obviously didn't play out. But I do think that I hope there is an effort, or if there's not, there should be an effort to and I think the city, it makes sense for the city to take the lead on that, is to find some people to buy Dewberry out and move along, and because it's a lingering scar, in downtown, and it could be something beneficial to our downtown economy. I don't agree with the idea of giving them all these tax breaks and subsidies. I thought that was ridiculous. And
do you get the impression he's trying to extort and blackmail?
Obviously,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's his game, right?
That's his game.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, I just think we've got to figure out a better way. And I know it's easy for me to say because
right.
I'm not there anymore.
Two guys on a microphone, right?
Right,
we have
right.
it easy.
Right.
Yeah.
But, the building it's largely finished, right? I mean, it needs to be finished off with, but for an investor or a group of investors to come in and say, you know what, we're going to take this.
You have Coran's ear. Do you think Coran would ever do this?
I don't have Coran's ear in that way necessarily.
You have Alan Taylor's
but I would love to see. I mean, that's one group that I would love. I don't know. Maybe they've already talked to Dewberry. I have no inside knowledge of that. But I'd love to see somebody of that ilk take this on and get it done.
Yeah, because I think we all do. Kenny Gilbert, thank you for watching us. Turn that into a sizzle reel about the Landmark Hotel. What have we missed? We've covered a lot.
We covered
90
a lot.
minutes. You're so good, dude. Make it easy to do this.
I love doing this. I don't know.
Anything else that should be out there?
Well, I want to talk about the wedding industry real briefly, because I've been concerned, to be honest, about what I've been hearing in the last year, and I know there's been concern within the wedding industry in Albemarle County for what is perceived to be a lack of support for the wedding industry, and they're kind of cracking down on permits now and not allowing new venues to host weddings or special events. And I think that's really unfortunate, because when you think about economic development, I mean, there's hardly something that's more advantageous for a community than something like a thriving wedding industry, because it's bringing a whole lot of revenue and economic activity to our region and to our community, and it's not bringing kids that we have to pay.
This is basically what he said right there. This is basically what he said, is the wedding situation brings 100 to 250 people to a weekend event. Right. These people take their money, spend it in ridiculous fashion, because that's what you do at a wedding.
Right.
And then they get on their car or on an airplane or a train and get the hell out of Charlottesville and not tax our resources.
Right.
It's the best kind of
it's
consumer.
Amazing. Right. And so I understand there are impacts, but I really feel like we should be bending over to support this particular kind of industry. And I hate to see entrepreneurs. I know that there's a couple out just off of Georgetown Road, and others that have been trying to get into the business of hosting events, and that we should be encouraging that. And there are so many talented wedding professionals here. Charlottesville has become something of a mecca for
it's an epicenter
for weddings, and obviously I've got bias because I'm in the industry, but that's something where I feel like we need to do more to support those local entrepreneurs, support that industry. And so maybe some of your listeners can put some pressure on.
We talked about this with Al Schoenberg of Keswick Vineyards.
Love those guys.
He came on the show. I love him too. And guys, if you're watching the show, Dave Norris should be your choice for an officiant for your wedding. He is so popular that my wife and I, when we got married, we had to scramble at the last minute for an officiant, and you were booked. Like people
I remember,
yeah. But I have seen you in action at other weddings, and you do a very good job.
Well, thank you.
Al said this. He's like, why would they limit us trying to have out-of-towners spend their money in our area and then leave? It seems like the opposite of what they're doing. And yesterday I had Matthew Woodson, who's very involved with Greene County and the economic side of Greene County, like development and whatnot. And he basically said that Greene County and its officials are looking at what Albemarle County are doing and doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, because they pointed to Airbnb. Yeah. Albemarle County is trying to limit Airbnbs.
Right.
Greene County says, give them to us.
Right, exactly.
Okay? If you don't want them, we'll take them.
Yeah.
Put it in perspective.
No, I totally agree. Like, I know some people have concerns about Airbnbs, but in general, I think the more we can be doing to help, in that case, help homeowners bring in a little extra income and add to the inventory in our community for visitors and tourists and wedding guests and whatnot. I think it's great. So we should be encouraging that. It goes back to and to a certain extent, the discussion we're having about housing. Like, we got to get creative about housing solutions. I heard you talking with, it was either Rory or somebody about accessory units. Like, we should be encouraging people to create basement apartments, mother-in-law apartments, small, tiny houses in their backyards. Like, this is adding to the affordable housing inventory, and it's bringing in income for those homeowners, right? And so it's a win-win, right? And yet, and so we tried when I was in office to loosen some of those regulations, and I think it's in better shape now than it was before, but it still seems to be a burden. And yeah, Airbnb is very similar. Like, so I want to see us get smarter about this stuff, because otherwise, Greene County, all these other counties are just going to jump all over.
And it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
And when I think also to you, it seems so obvious as well. Like, part of me sees like you almost scratching your head if you weren't on air and being like, gosh, this is such a no-duh statement. Right. I don't get why people don't get this.
Right. I know.
Dude, you crushed it. Seriously, you crushed it.
Thanks for having me on, Jerry.
You made us better.
Yeah,
you crushed it.
You're doing a great job. So.
Thank you so much. We are going to close the show. Harris, thank you for directing behind us. Judah Wickhauer, thank you for directing as well, producing. Tomorrow, Crystal Napier, an African-American entrepreneur that's making big-time strides in our community and coming to market with ideas that need to be spotlighted, and we're going to do it for her right here on the I Love CVille Show. Crystal, I cannot wait to talk with you tomorrow on the program. On Monday, Laura Fonder, the executive chef at Dooner's restaurant, she's going to join us. We have Sina McGill next week, along with Gerard Smith, who's running for Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. I'm very excited to see Gerard Smith, his platform, his forum, what he stands for, and introduce it to you, because the Board of Supervisors have some seats open that we need to follow closely as well. Dave Norris made us look good. He is good people, and I think you guys saw it. I see the interaction on the show. People like what he had to say. And he has made it clear, guys, for the people that are asking, he is not running for council again?
I'm not
No?
I mean, I would never say never about something in the
Down the
distant
road.
future, but
Not short term.
I am not running this year, categorically.
Okay, categorically, Dave Norris is not running. I asked the question. There you go. He's not running for the 3 spots that are up for grabs, guys. I'm Jerry Miller. I'm so grateful for everybody participating in the show. We close the program the same way. Charlottesville, Virginia, please, please be good to each other. We will see you in 22 and a half hours right here on the I Love CVille show. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. You crushed it.
All right. Thank you, man. That was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May I invite you back?